What's up, amigos? Commander Jaime here. Today we're going to do a Nightrose Beatrice premium deck profile. We got some support with Beatrice from the Clan Selection Volume 2. I'm very excited about this, and let's start with the winning image, go into the card choices, and then show off some combo plays. So let's get right into it. So onto the winning image, and honestly not much has changed. As with granblue, there's a lot of options that we can go into, like different types of card choices, ratios that dictate really the winning image of the deck. And so for me, I wanted to stay consistent as Nightrose being the main Vanguard, and then everything else really supporting that winning image. And so remember, with Bad Bounty, we're able to rewrite during the battle phase, and then Nightrose, of course, will extend more attacks to really have a threatening turn of 6-7 in attacks, depending on your extenders, how much kind of blast you had, and things of that nature. Not only that, but we could fall back into the Obadiah Strike to get our pieces, set up a field, and really go from there for the next turn and everything like that. So the question is, what does Beatrice now do for us? And really with Beatrice is that her skill is very simple. It's when it's placed, you can Soul Blast one and revive anything that's not her to Regard Circle. So phenomenal skill. It's basically a Column Bard, but without the Counter Blast, and instead it's a Soul Blast. So that actually alleviates some of those Counter Blast management issues that we've had before, where we kind of are limited to the Counter Blast. But now we can do every play with one less Counter Blast, assuming that we're using Beatrice instead of the Column Bard. So for example, when you do the Nightrose 4 Skull Dragon attack turn, that only requires one Counter Blast now. It doesn't require two Counter Blasts, it's just one Counter Blast and one Soul Blast, of course, with Beatrice. And so things of that nature that allow us to further extend or even conserve Counter Blast management for next turn in that respect. And so what I mean by even attack extending, we have a card like Coded the Ghostie that helps us be another attacker too as well. And I'll go into elaboration once we go into more of the skills with it, but it's there that honestly Evan Alberto, very well known for the Nightrose Zarzan build, and he actually just really realized that this card can be an attack extender. And then of course, if you have a booster that has power enough, it makes that column actually threatening. And so we have Nightrose that actually gives power to our regards, which make that even more threatening, that actually make it count. And then of course, since we are playing more of a pure granblue build, we are not playing the Zarzan engine at all here. We are relying on Navigator to help us mill enough cards to really get our combo pieces, and then of course get things going as like Skull Dragon get bigger. We have cards that become full power when you have 10 cards or more. And if you don't have to rely as much with Obadiah, that'd be great. That's fantastic. And I'll talk about a little bit more once we get to that grade 1s as well. So let's get into the card choices and go from there. Onto the grade 3s. We are playing 9 grade 3s. We are playing 4 of the Nightrose, 2 Beatrice, 1 Nightstorm from G Era, and 2 Skull Dragon. So with Nightrose, like I said, her skill is a continuous. She gives plus 5k for every regard, and at the end of the battle, they are retired. And that's very impactful because cards like that are so weak and actually have that 5k to have multi attack much more threatening. You can get through trigger thresholds much more easier. That nature, that's still important. The second skill, of course, on attack Counter Blast 1, you can call up to 2 units into a column. And then if your opponent's Vanguard was grade 3 or greater, you get an additional 10k to the Vanguard power. So it becomes a 22k beater at that point, where Bad Bounty that turn can actually become more threatening from that second attack, but of course being able to extend attacks. And so Nightrose is the main right target. That's why we play 4. You can reduce it to 3 and play with some of the ratios here. One of the things that I have really tried to mess with is like 3 Beatrice and 3 Skull Dragon, and somehow reduce Nightrose and doing like a 3-3 ratio almost. But like I felt like keeping it like this and then having these more of like the supplementary support just made things a lot easier. And there are other cards that help see at least 1 or 2 copies of these cards with be it not so dependent on it, and I'll talk about a little bit what that looks like too. And so going into Beatrice, we have 2 copies, like I said, on place called something, but she also has a Vanguard skill, actually 2 of them. And so if you decide to go into Vanguard with her, Protect 2 might be an option, especially if you're going against a clan that doesn't remove any rearguards. So you can potentially use those as Intercept Shield, because she gives all the Ghosties plus 5k attack, shield, and of course intercept. So that way they can intercept from the front row and everything if they're like a grade 3 or a heal trigger like Rick the Ghostie, for example. That third skill is where if it sees a rearguard being retired by a card's ability during your turn, you can Counter Blast 1, revive a Ghostie that is a grade less or lower than that, and is not once per turn. So you can do that chain attack like I mentioned with the standard profile. You can go from Skull Dragon, it retires itself, called the Jesse the Ghostie, into Damien, into Rick the Ghostie, and so on. It doesn't come up as often, at least the way I'm playing it. As you can see, Nightrose is the main thing, so this is more the supplementary, where her Regard Circle skill is the main priority. Not only she's able to help enable attacks with conservation of counterblast, but she is able to allow us to do the Pseudo denial Griffin play with Negro Lily and Cannoneer, and I'll talk about a little bit what that looks like in the combo. But basically, because of Beatrice, with those two other cards, we have access to a Pseudo Denial Griffin, and that is very powerful. And so matchups against like Fenrir or other classes that have this big beefy rearguard that is high on crit and it needs to be stopped, well, you pop it. That's really what it's there for. And Skull Dragon, of course, it's our beater, 2k for every card in the drop zone. This is very essential. Navigators help with make this card even bigger and faster. Not only that, but it's just a grade 3 that we can use to pitch to stride, right, if we need to, especially in Mega Calling matchups where you can't really call units. So at that point, you can just rewrite Skull Dragon as a big bag boy Vanguard hit face to the Mega Calling player because you use a card like Redora, for example. And then we have Giera Nightstorm extending attacks, of course, and that's what he's there for. Nothing more really except for that. You do not want to ride him, and so let's get into the other grades. Onto the grade 2s. We are playing 12 grade 2s. We're playing 4 Columbar. We are playing 4 Greed Shade over here, 1 Cannoneer, 1 Jessie the Ghostie, 1 Ghost Ship, and 1 King Serpent. So with the basics, Columbar, he is Counterblast 1, fetch anything from a drop zone and send it to the drop zone, or from the deck to the drop zone. And then of course revive anything. This is very essential. I play 4 copies because I want to see this in the early game for sure. And then of course he is still potentially needed sometimes to extend attack still, so he's not discounted, so just be mindful of that. And then of course I'll show some plays that actually make this card even valuable to see at 4 copies. And then we have Greed Shade over here. I've messed with Greed Shade going down to 3, but like his consistency and the effort, especially with Navigator being used, you can grab key cards from your drop zone, and that could be potentially your Nightrose, your right target, or anything like that, or shield, heal triggers, PGs, all that kind of stuff. So that's why I still see value in playing 4 with Greed Shade, because you know you can actually win place, discard 1, mill 2, grab anything except for itself and add it to your hand. That is very key. And then of course the 10 plus more drop zone skill is just plus 5k, so it becomes a 14k beater. If you have Nightrose, it's a 19k beater by itself. And then of course if you have a booster, it makes some really threatening thresholds just by having that column and just be doing its own thing. So going into the text, really, we have Cannoneer over here. Just like I mentioned, we have a Pseudo Denial Griffin play. What it does is that GB1, when it's placed, you could also hollow it if you want to. You can actually play Counterblast 1, choose up to one of your opponent's rear guards, and retire it. And if this unit is hollow, you can draw a card. Most of the time, you're going to hollow it and then use the skill to retire, so that way you can get advantage. When you G-Guard, you are using 2 Counterblasts, so be mindful of that. And then, of course, Beatrice costs a Soul Blast, so you are using resources, so just be mindful of that. That's all I'm saying. But during your turn, you can get annoying rear guards out of the way too, so that's always important too. And then we have Jessie the Ghostie. Jessie the Ghostie, oh my gosh, this card does so much. And surprisingly, I was tempted to play 2, but honestly, there's so much cards that I like to use, and I felt like Jessie 1 is not that bad. And so what he does, he has a drop zone skill. It's an act. Retire 2 rear guards that are not him, basically, and then call this unit to rear guard circle. And it's a hard once per turn. Now, why would you do that? Is because you can get rid of cards from the field into the drop zone that are better off in the drop zone or are just useless on the board. And then Jessie is a rear guard is really good because it has an auto when it attacks. It gets plus 5k until the end of the battle. And of course, you can retire this unit and it counter charges if you not have counter charge already with this card. And so this is one of the ways that you can countercharge. Jessie is very important with that. There's some early game pressure, but also like mid game pressure that you can use with him. Works well with the Beatrice play if you do end up writing Beatrice, but it's generic. So your Vanguard can be Nightrose too, and you can still get the countercharge, whereas the grade 1 is specific to Ghostie, but there's ways around that one too. But Jessie the Ghostie is very key, and most of the time, it's one of the cards that are first to get milled selectively by the Ghostie support. And I'll talk about a little bit what that looks like when I get to Damien. And so going into Ghost Ship over here, it's a 29k beater on draw at the end of the battle. Retire itself draw, of course. So he's still reliable. It allows us to generate advantage still, so it's still needed. Playing in 1 copy at least is definitely great. And then King Serpent, it is a card when it's brought from the drop zone, you can counter charge and soul charge 1. So this is resource management here. King Serpent is flexible, it's not GB restricted, so you can use it even early on as in grade 2, grade 1, grade 3 turn. If you can revive it from the drop zone, it's happened. I mean, you have Navigator, so things happen and all that sorts. But anyway, it's a phenomenal counter charger that you can use. You can call this during the battle phase to further extend attacks and so on. Just a lot of flexibility at that point. So let's get into the grade 1s. Onto the grade 1s, we have 12 grade 1s. We're playing 4 Skeleton Seas Navigator, 4 Damien the Ghostie, 3 Negarbone, and then 1 Ripple Banshee. So we'll start with Navigator. So Navigator's purpose is to make sure we have enough cards in drop zone as fast as possible. 2 reasons. 1 is because of drop zone count. 2, because we need some key pieces in the drop zone to really make cards like Nightrose, Obadiah, Beatrice, attack extending, all that stuff actually worthwhile, because you do need combo pieces. Granblue still has that issue where you need setup. So Navigator helps with that, especially if you're not playing the Zarzan engine. This is the fastest way to really build up that drop zone, especially if you open up with it. I play 4 copies because it's that essential, especially since Nightrose is the main focus. I've seen different decks that reduce this to 3 or cut it out and then play different cards that kind of help mitigate that, but this is something that if you haven't realized, this deck can be very aggressive where you can have cards, you can have Navigator resolve once or twice, and then depending on the other cards that you have, by the time you actually have to first stride, you can go into bad bounty first stride. If you have a decent enough drop zone setup, all that kind of stuff, you are just aggro no matter what. But if you can't resolve enough Navigators, then you can still fall back to Obadiah, and if you milled once with Navigator, Obadiah can get you the remaining pieces that you need. And then that way you have actually effective deck as well and a decent sized drop zone to work with. And so that's why I still play 4 Navigators. You can remove the Navigators with a card like Jessie the Ghostie. That's where Jessie is actually starting to play a different role too, that helps you clean up that board. Or it could be a booster with the Nightrose being able to like retire at the end of the battle after that. So it's just a 12k booster at that point. And then of course going into Damien. Now this card is really cool. And you're probably wondering, why are you playing max copies of this card compared to the other Beatrice and Jessie? And so, for example, this card has 2 skills, Vanguard Circle, Rearguard Circle. When it's placed from hand, search your deck for up to 1 card with Ghostie in its card name, and then send it to the drop zone and shuffle your deck. So that lets you get Jessie, that lets you get Beatrice, that lets you get heal triggers that are Ghostie, and so on. And this is important because it's a grade 1. It's something that you can use right away, and it can be a rest target for Navigator too. And there's a play that I can show you that really extends for that. And that second skill is also nice, where at the end of the turn, at the end of the battle that it attacked, if you have a Vanguard with Ghostie in the name, you can actually retire this unit and actually countercharge if you haven't countercharged yet with this unit. So that's where even more countercharging comes into play. And if you really need it, you can actually stride into Obadiah, because it has the Ghostie name. So even though you have Nightrose or Skull Dragon, or even worse, Nightstorm as your Vanguard, Obadiah has that Ghostie name, so you're able to countercharge with Damien over here. And then if you can get plus 5k with Beatrice, with Nightrose, or Obadiah, it becomes a 13k attacker at that point. Or it's just a booster at that point. So however you want to use it, but I play 4 copies because I just want to open up with it, especially with the Navigators. And then the last grade ones that are also great to open up with, or even send into the drop zone, specifically these, is Negabrone and Ripple Banshee. And so Negabrone is, you know, drop zone skill, discard a card, put this at the bottom of the deck, call grade 1 from your drop zone, call it to Rearguard. If you have 10 or more, you can call any grade. So before, I have mentioned this is one of the most powerful cards in granblue outside of Greed Shade, is that because it can turn any card in your hand into anything that you want of quality in your drop zone. So Negabrone is still valuable. I recommend not playing less than 3. And this is something that you can actually revive Ripple Banshee right off the bat, because it revives grade 1. So Ripple Banshee, when it's called from the drop zone, you could Soul Blast 1, draw a card, and it gets plus 4k until the end of the turn. So it's a 12k booster attacker. Very great as having a body on the board and also generating advantage at the same time. You Soul Blast, so you're getting units from your soul into the drop zone. And so you see that cycle of revival and all that kind of stuff. So it's super imperative with these cards, and so that's why they're still played at these ratios. I honestly would like to bump Ripple to 2, but there's only so much room, but definitely no less than 3 for Negabrone. And so let's go into the next cards. Onto the grade 0s. We're playing 17 grade 0s. We're playing Grenache the starter. We are playing 4 heals. We are playing 10 crit. Yeah, and 4 draw, or 2 draw. So anyways, with the heal trigger, so you want to use the Ghostie ones because you're able to actually mill it with Damien the Ghostie. It can be used to be powered up and shield value wise with Beatrice too. But one of the things that I'm trying out is actually playing 1 Dewey the Ghostie. It's the card that basically when you G-guard, you can actually bind this in another heal. It doesn't matter if it's Rick the Ghostie or a different one. You bind those 2 heals and you can either counter charge or soul charge. So it helps with that counter blast management, even soul management if you really needed to. It doesn't come up as much as I thought it would be. It's just, you know, being mindful of it. Like rewriting gives you another card in soul. You can actually ride during the battle phase, or they're in the battle phase with bad bounty, so that's another soul, and so you can just be mindful of that stuff. And going into more of the criticals, we have 4 over here of Chad, so we can stride, and honestly cards like Skull Dragon, Nightstorm, Beatrice, we're gonna mill them to the drop zone, or we're gonna discard them, you know, just because we need them in the drop zone because they're phenomenal rear guards at that point. So anything that helps with stride with 1 card is much appreciated. Then we have the Sentinels. We have the 2 30k critical Sentinel and the 2 draw PG. This is a ratio that has just been working for me for a while. and I've stuck with it. You can change it if you want to go full on crit, or if you want more draws, or you can go into the grade 1 PGs. You just gotta make room. But ultimately, I want room in the grade 1, so I have the Sentinels here. And then the last crits, of course, you want the GB one that goes into Soul, gives plus 10k to your Vanguard. Soul Management, of course, nice rearguard boost and all that kind of stuff if you really need it. And then Cody the Ghostie. This is the card that you're probably wondering. Evan had a phenomenal just experience with this card. It does work. So its skill, auto, drop zone skill. When your unit without Ghostie in its card name is put into your drop zone from rearguard, you can actually counterblast 1 and call this through an open rearguard circle. So cards like Skull Dragon that will retire itself, or Ghost Ship, you can actually just counterblast and revive it in that same spot, essentially. Or another open rearguard circle, it just depends how you want it. And really what it does is that if you have Nightrose, it's a 9k attacker, now you just had to compensate with a booster. And that booster is going to get plus 5k with Nightrose or any triggers that you stack onto it, especially in a bad bounty turn. So what this does is that if you use this during your grade 3 turn, Nightrose normally would get to 5 attacks with using 2 counterblasts, but now with Beatrice it's just 1 counterblast and 1 soul blast. But now with that second counterblast, you can use Cody to extend a 6th attack at that point. If you go into the bad bounty turn, this can go into the 7th attack with that counterblast. Now you can save. So you can start thinking, I'm like, wow, this card is just another attacker. And honestly, some people haven't caught on yet, so they might catch them off guard and they're thinking that the last Skull Dragons are the final attacks, and then all of a sudden you pop out Cody the Ghostie and go for the game, right? It's one of those things. But honestly, you just have to try it out. If you don't want to play it, don't play it, but I recommend at least trying it out, and you'll be surprised how handy Cody the Ghostie really is. Onto the strides, we have 10 strides over here. We're playing 2 Big Obadiah, we're playing 2 Bad Bounty, 1 Original Obadiah, we have the GB8, we have 2 Cyclones, and of course the Megiddo Ballerina package over here. So your most cards that you're going to go into 9 times out of 10 is really Obadiah and Bad Bounty. Like I said, Bad Bounty, at the end of the battle that attacks, you can counterblast, return this card to the G zone, and you can actually discard 3 cards, then grab a grade 3 from your drop zone, write it as stand. So that's where you can get 2 Vanguard attacks at that point. That's where you can pick Nightrose to further extend, and then of course Big Obadiah over here. Counterblast 1, flip anything in the G zone, you can flip a Cyclone over here, and then of course search up to 5 cards from your deck, set them to the drop zone, then call up to 2 cards for every face-up card, and they each get plus 5k into the end of the turn. So that's where you can start setting up your drop zone, you have a decent field, build up hand advantage, all that kind of stuff. That's what Obadiah still serves for. Has the Ghostie name, like I said. Bad Bounty is the very aggressive finisher that we have, that we can consistently go into. Definitely play the 2-2 ratio, has been working for me. Obadiah, the original, is that, you know, when it's placed, search up to 3 cards, mill it, and then if at least 2 of them were the hollow ability, then you can call a Ghostie with that is a normal unit and call it behind it, basically. And it's counterblast free, it's cycle blast free, so if you get damage tonight, this is a card that you can go into. It also has the Ghostie name. But what's really cool is since it just says normal Ghostie, you can send Cannoneer, Nightstorm, and then Beatrice. And since those 2 cards are hollow, you can revive the Beatrice, and Beatrice can revive something else, so you can start like building a field that way too. GB8, solid card. Again, it's GB8, revive full board, plus 10k to each unit. Why not? Cyclones, it's really just for flip fodder, because if you do end up going into Beatrice or using Ricks, the Ghosties, like as boosters, they get bigger and stuff. Anything like that sorts, really, that's what it is for. But you can always change it out for a pair of Nightrose or Negrosonger or any other cards or more G guards. But yeah, and then the package over here, I don't really use it often, but it's just a nice to have. So if, as you can see, I'm only playing 2 Skull Dragons. There's no 4 Skull Dragon Megiddo attack turn anymore. We just don't really go into it anymore. We just usually go into Bad Bounty and then GG, you know, and so that's really why that's there. Onto the G guards. We're playing 6 G guards. We're playing 1 Negro Lily, 1 Deep Corpse Dragon, 1 Rectome, 1 Negro Mode, and 2 Negro Nora. Negro Nora is our biggest shield, but she's GB1, so be conscientious of that. Soul Blast 1, revive 2 cards onto the Guardian Circle that are different grades, and so that's where you can get your PGs, your Crit Sentinels, or your grade 1s with high shield. You can get absurd numbers of shield. You can even grab heal triggers too, to not have to like discard a card for a PG, for example, just enough shield to make it a 1 card guard for even Vanguard attacks. That's super essential. Negro Lily here, like I said, it's the Pseudo denial Griffin play. You counterblast 1, retire 1 of your guards, and revive a Ghostie. Guess what? Beatrice is a Ghostie, and then of course this gets 10k shield as well. And then you can pop something else, and then you can mitigate that attack that's still going through too, so you can get really 2 for 1 at that point. And Deep Quartz is there in case you really didn't have that mill set up. Helps mill 2 cards at least, getting some plus 5k shield if it's decent. Ractome is a filter. It's also, you know, it's just really a filter at that point. I was gonna say it's a Cray Elemental, but we don't play tier anymore. I actually tried out tier first, but then I took it out because it just wasn't as useful. And we're playing over here Negro mode. Of course, it's basically a Negro Nora, but of course you can use it right away. Soul Blast 1, 5k for every 5 cards in the drop zone, so it can become a 30k shield, which is still valuable at this point. Onto the combo part of the video. So I'm going to show off a ride progression of a high roll where your grade 2 turn really becomes bunkers with the new support, and really how that grade 2 looks like to potentially set up so that way you go first, have a solid grade 3 turn, and then of course have like a heal trigger to be able to guard defensively and go into GB2 pretty easily, so that way your next turn you could do a solid Obadiah or even go into a bed bounty turn. So the key cards that you want to see early on is a Navigator, a Damien, and a Colin Lombard for sure. Negrabone can be actually milled, but if you open up with him, that's even better. And then any other card that helps, you know, like the Nightrose right target is good. So this is a pretty solid hand. So with this hand, let's say we're going first, we're drawing to turn, we see, oh, Great Shade, that's actually pretty good. We'll ride with Damien, right? And so one of the key things that I recommend is do Damien first, because we only have the one Ghostie the Ghostie, so you want to mill Jessie, and then you can do the shuffle and then draw for Grenache. So this is our hand so far, not bad. We pass turn, they attack us, counter blast, damage I should say. So that's one counter blast to work with. Now going into our turn, we'll stand, draw, and we'll go into Columbard. Now this is important. Usually we go into Ghost Ship or some kind of other piece if we need to get it, but we're gonna counter blast 1 and actually fetch Ripple Banshee. And depending on how this works out, you can boot it behind the Vanguard if you want to. At this point, it doesn't really matter. But when you do that, you can Soul Blast 1, Soul Blast the Damien, and actually draw 1. So this is what our hand looks like so far. Then we'll call actually Negrabone over here. Doesn't matter if it's here. And then we'll have Navigator here because he'll be a booster. And with Navigator, you're able to rest any 2 rear guards. So you can rest these 2 and actually mill 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Decent. And then this is the cool part that stacks. So now you're starting to see that in the drop zone you have 7 cards. You can use Jessie to retire the rest of the units now to go Jessie over here. The next thing you want to do, use Negrabone to revive Ripple Banshee. So you get discard card. I'm going to discard let's say King Serpent for example. Bottom deck Negrabone, revive the Ripple. Again, Soul Blast 1, draw 1 card. So this is what our hand looks like so far. From here, you can actually call a card like Greed Shade to call it, to discard another card. I'll discard this, mill 2 cards, 1, 2. Would you look at that? Wow, double Cody the Ghostie. That's funny. So as you can see, by just doing that play, we're already 10 plus cards in the drop zone. It's really that easy. Oh yeah, you gotta add a card too. So let's add, I don't know, Stride Fodder for example. Yeah, Stride Fodder. So this is what our hand now looks like. And really what this does is that you feel the drop zone, you're at 10 cards, you have a decent field, and you can start applying pressure. So with Jessie, he'll get plus 5k with skill, and then at the end of the battle, he'll retire, and then of course, counter charge. So you won't be damage denied. That's very important. And so now with the Vanguard, you have 9 plus 12, 21k, which hits a trigger threshold because they're in grade 1 right now. So drive check, draw trigger, power to Vanguard, or regard, draw card, and then boom. 9 plus 7 is 16. Greed Shade gets plus 5 because it's 10 or more cards. So 21k as well. So again, it passes through a trigger threshold. This is actually pretty solid. And you can see that you already have a decent size drop zone with some decent size or decent quality cards in there too. Then let's say you take 2 more damage and then go to your turn. Draw for turn. You want to ride Nightrose, get Protect 2, and seeing what we have so far. As you can see, we have Jessie and all that stuff, but we don't have any Skull Dragons or Ghost Ship. So what I'll do, call Columbard, skill. Fetch Beatrice. Let's revive King Serpent, just to replenish our resources even more easier. And then what you can do is actually retire these two to call Ghostie. Before you actually retire those, rest them too with Navigator skill so you can mill 5 more cards. And look at that, we actually have Skull Dragon. Oh my gosh, that's phenomenal. So we have a good target here. We're gonna use Beatrice. We have a heal trigger too. So this just is an example sequence. This doesn't have to be the exact same one. But for example, you can actually attack with the Greed Shade. This will get +5 from its skill, and then Nightrose, so 19k. This will retire. Then you have Jessie the Ghostie over here. This will also get +5 from its own skill. Retire, countercharge if you didn't. Then for Nightrose, attack. Counterblast 1. Revive this. Beatrice skill. So plus revive a Greed Shade. And with Greed Shade, you can discard, let's say Navigator. Mill 2 more cards. And get a heal trigger. So you have a decent actually hand size, and this doesn't include the protect marker that you get for riding Nightrose. And then of course, shuffle, and twin drive. Any triggers great. And then you get attack with this column. This retires. Oh yeah, Ripple Wrench, you retires, and we have a really big enough drop zone that this becomes very big, and it retires. So now, what you're left off with is really you still have Counterblast to work with. You actually have a big, big drop zone to work with, and you have a Vanguard to work with. So if you need to do like the Pseudo denial Griffin play, you can use that to retire to call it, and then call the Cannoneer. As we saw, we had Cannoneer already in place. If you want to extend more attacks, you can actually Counterblast 1 for the Cody the Ghostie as well. In this combo, I just want to show off a Bad Bounty turn. So for example, let's say you strode into Bad Bounty, you have no soul, but you're on Nightrose or any grade 3. You revive Skull Dragons and you have boosters that you want to work with. And so this is what your field looks like. You want to have 3 Counterblasts. So your first attack will be the Vanguard, and then any drive checks give the power to a booster. So I have a crit, so you could put the crit on the Vanguard if it's hitting, or on a Skull Dragon, but put the power behind a booster. So let's say Ripple Banshee, so she's a 12k booster plus another 10k, makes her 22k. And then discard 3, so Counterblast, do the skill where we could actually get Nightrose here. So now you have 1 card in the soul that actually works out, and you can attack with the Skull Dragons. So that's the 3rd attack. They retire, and one of them boosted, so that way you get the value out of it. Then use Nightrose to call a column, do Beatrice, and let's say a beater, and then Beatrice skill, so +1, call the remaining other Skull Dragon. Looks familiar, right? Plus 10k of course, and then no triggers or anything like that. So you're gonna do the same thing where this attacks, and then this is where you want to sneak that in. So we've done 1, 2, 3, 4 attacks, then 5, 6. So this will retire, and because we have Cody the Ghostie, we can Counterblast 1 to revive it here, and this only got 1 trigger, so this is 12 plus 4, which is 16. 16 plus 10 from Nightrose is 26, then plus another trigger, 36. So this is a 36k column. And if they didn't see that coming, they were like, wait, what? So with 3 Counterblasts, you can do 7 attacks that are actually hitting some decent numbers over the 20k plus, sometimes even 30k in this example as well. So yeah. Lastly, I just want to show off the G-Guard play, like the Pseudo denial Griffin play. So when you have a Vanguard, typically Beatrice will be standing because you would call hard to call another unit. So you do have a Vanguard, you can actually call the Negro Lily with the G-Guardian. So Counterblast 1, retire it, and then revive a normal Ghostie. You can revive it itself because it's eligible. Then if you had soul, so let's say this wasn't the soul, you soul blasted, revive a Cannoneer, and then of course hollow it, Counterblast 1, retire one of the Vanguards, draw a card. And so this actually compensates for the heal you G-Guarded with. And then if you want, you can intercept with it additional with a 10k. So that really helps out with that respect. So that's how simple it is. Just be mindful of the counterblast. And that's the deck profile, amigos. I hope you enjoyed it. This is a more updated Nightrose with the Beatrice support. It's actually really fun. I do recommend playing with it. Like I said, this is not the Zarzan build. And like I said, there's many ways and variations that you can tweak it to your liking and your preference in your metagame. So I recommend tweaking it and trying it out. Let me know your feedback too. And if you like the video, give it a like, share it with some friends, any granblue players or even premium players, just feel free to share this video. And then of course, subscribe, amigos. So see ya. Bye.